to Inside the Artist Studio. I am here with one of my favorite people, Andy Evansen. Hello, Andy.
Thanks, Rose. Hi. One of my favorite people also.
It is so, you know what? I think it's because we Midwesterners just bond.
Yeah, we can understand each other's accents.
That's right. That's right. We know exactly what you're saying when you go, "Oh, bless your heart."
Yeah.
That's not a nice one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I was telling you before we got started, I love this shot, seeing your studio and how beautiful it is.
Yeah, it's a big space. I do a lot of recording for my Zoom workshops and stuff, which is a big part of what I've been doing lately. It started, during the pandemic. I used to have to travel everywhere, but then for a couple of years, we had to do everything remotely and online. And we invested a lot into all the camera equipment and stuff. So we figured, why not just keep that going? And it's been nice because it's allowed me to stay home a little bit more too. I love to travel, but I was traveling a lot.
Yeah. That is kind of a thing with artists. I think, and certainly sort of in the representational realm where, it's not a bad gig to take on these workshop things and you get to travel and see, but it does wear you down after a while, I would think.
Yeah, and you and I talked about that during COVID and kind of the shift that happened in my work, how I would just take those long walks to maintain my sanity. And for the longest time, I mean, I've grown up in the Midwest. I'm very familiar with, Wisconsin and Minnesota. But, for a couple of years, just being able to slow down and really kind of pay attention to the changing of the seasons again and noticing more subtle shifts in the landscape, less obvious things, dramatic things, which our seasons are dramatic here. You get the same thing, the heat and the green and the giant snowfall and the color of autumn. But I started to find myself enjoying painting more subtle things at that point, and I've been really trying to stick to that in my work, not lose that.
And this was, I remember you saying on these walks, this kind of started a whole series and a body of work that was like within a 2-mile radius of your studio, right?
Yeah, I would just take off and walk up the hill and and it's amazing. Like I said, I've got my headphones in or not. Sometimes I'm just listening to the wind and the birds, but and I'm not always, I don't have my painting gear with me a lot of times either. I'm just going for a brisk walk. But again, just seeing, hey, that wasn't there yesterday, or a tree that I've liked for a long time all of a sudden is down or, cut down or fallen down or something like that. And, or that one that I did of the hawk where I just, it would seem like it would follow me on my walks a lot of times and, take off and kind of circle around the land again. And I didn't see him, during the winter, and then started my walks again in the spring and saw him up there, kind of like, hey, you're back. He's back. Yeah. I titled that painting, He's Back. Both of us thinking that about each other. But
he was probably thinking the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, this guy's back.
Yeah.
You were telling me that Joe Paquette, who's another wonderful painter out of Minneapolis, and talk about an accent that you need an interpreter for. He's from New York.
Well, yeah, he shifts back. He talks like a Minnesotan, but then if you bump into somebody that lived in New York, man, he's right back there.
Oh, yeah, you guys. Yeah, you just you can make fun of Joe. Don't tell him.
Oh, yeah.
He probably has mafia connections or something. But you and like Joe was saying, it's hard to find things to paint in the Midwest, but you find them. So two questions there. Why is it hard to find things in the Midwest? And I think, okay, as a Midwesterner, I think it's beautiful there, but then I get, it's flat, compared to the Rocky Mountain region where I am now. It's pretty dramatic here.
Right.
So talk about that. And what was Joe meaning by you find these interesting compositions?
Yeah, Joe was the king of finding, beauty in the ordinary. He's amazing at that. And he lives up in St. Paul. So he has a little bit more of not urban, but he definitely, paints more of the cityscapes and along with his landscapes as well. But we're good traveling partners. We find ourselves getting excited about the same thing. We're driving around. It's like, look at that, pull over and we both paint that. So we're definitely attracted to the same thing. And I think you do become attuned a little bit more to, like we were saying, a less obvious beauty or a more subtle beauty. Instead of, wow, look at the light on that mountain, you have to pay attention a little bit more to find these compositions. And my paintings in the show, I wanted to make sure I kind of put a spotlight on that. It's very flat here. It's
Yeah.
not just the Midwest. The Midwest is very beautiful, and we have, the bluffs down by La Crosse and Dubuque, Iowa, are dramatic, and Duluth is you've been to Duluth. That's a
Yeah.
really cool city on Lake Superior. But here, in the farmland here in the Midwest, south of St. Paul here, yeah, it's pretty flat. So it is difficult to find the compositions. So I'm using things like, the hedgerows in the fields and a
Yeah.
moon or birds taking out, the little animals in the landscape and or shadows, all those kind of things really become that much more important when you don't have, the obvious compositional elements.
Let's speaking of, I think this is a great time to do a screen share here and talk about that, talk about exactly what you mean. And so I have this painting up front, 20th Street. Is this 20th Street?
200th Street.
It
Yeah.
is 200th. I thought that was a typo.
Nope, it's 200th. We live, that's, down in the country. They just start naming one. We live off of 190th. So this is that
Oh,
up a mile from this is one of my walking roads, the dirt roads that I walk on. Yep.
so I have had the pleasure of watching you paint. And, I think people, when they watch artists paint and they don't, like they're new to watching an artist paint, or they just stumble upon an artist outside painting on location,
Mhm.
it looks like magic. Like it just appeared. I think you, of all the artists I know, truly make it look like magic because, with watercolor is one of those mediums that I know if I were to pick up a brush again, it would not be watercolor.
It's tough.
Yeah, it's way harder than I think it looks. You make it look effortless,
Thank you.
but I think
That's a struggle to make it look effortless, though. People, and I fell into that same trap too. I think everybody does that when they're learning watercolor. You're just putting too much into it. They're having to go over things like that shadow, multiple times to get the value right. And because as soon as you do that, it's dead. So it takes a long time to get used to, how you have to pitch those values and mix your colors right, so you don't have to go over it multiple times, and it stays more luminous if you can kind of nail it in fewer washes, I think.
yeah. Also, would you talk about, so this is a road, so just a mile up from your
Yeah.
place.
Yeah.
So there are some great compositional things that I just think this one must have been fun to paint.
It really was. It looks like there's hardly anything there, and truth be told, there isn't.
Yeah.
But the fact of trying to get, the sunlight on the dirt road, that dramatic warm splash of color amongst all the cool hues of the snow and the shadows in the sky, the dramatic dark up there kind of negatively painting around the rooftop, and just indicating the house. I didn't want it to become about the house, obviously, but just having that little bit of contrast up there, leading the eye in. The negative painting, so the blue on the snow on the road, the ice and snow on the road itself, and that having to paint that shadow, not only just across the snow up on the top, across the dirt road, but then creating those negative patches of ice and snow by painting around them and trying to make them look natural and not formulaic. All that stuff is really, it's a fun challenge, but I just love that about watercolor. It's really what makes it so difficult is you're not painting your light shapes. You're creating light shapes by painting darker shapes around them. So you kind of have to plan ahead for all that kind of stuff in your mind's eye when you're starting off the painting.
I think that's it. It's like the plan ahead part.
Yeah,
Like, you can't make mistakes in it, in a sense.
right.
Didn't
Yeah.
plan for it.
And I make plenty of mistakes. Those
Yeah.
aren't the ones that I show.
Oh, good. Although you're kind of one of those people that I would love to know when trash pickup day is.
I get that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me where your dumpster is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, I bet you do. Well, and you know what? I think there's something else about this painting that it feels like a well-worn path in a sense.
Yes, and again, that's because I walk it, daily. Yeah, that's part of the impression I wanted to give as well. Even though it's rural and remote, it's got indications of still, tire tracks through the snow and the marks that way as well. And it does feel familiar. I had someone in my studio looking at some paintings and stuff, and I had that one sitting out, and he was looking at that, and he swore that this was they live in South Dakota. They were visiting in town. They popped into the studio, but he swore that was their road. It just becomes familiar that way to a lot of people.
Yeah. This taps into my childhood for sure.
Yeah, I get that a lot. I think a lot of people have Midwestern roots, even if they didn't grow up there. Maybe their grandparents were there and visited them. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I'm always trying to capture that in my paintings. I do love it here.
Hmm. All right, I'm gonna bring up this next one, which, okay, you go from subtle to even more subtle.
That one's probably the most dramatic one that I had in the show because of the contrast and the light and the warmth.
That one is really dramatic. Okay. And this one is after a summer rain.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, highlighting the flatness. I love painting the skies. We are blessed with those unobstructed views of storms coming in, big dramatic skies, and that's another thing that I think we kind of take for granted. But you'd be amazed how often, excuse me, sometimes I'm not on social media, I'm not even posting my paintings. I'm just posting, photos, the view outside of our house and stuff. If it's a beautiful sunset. I have so many people message me from places overseas or somewhere they just don't get those skies, and they ask me, can I use this as a painting reference? Or you are so lucky to see those kind of clouds, all those things. So yeah, we are definitely blessed with that. And I mean, this watercolor is a great medium for skies too. It's just so immediate and fresh. And if you can kind of capture it wet into wet, it makes it look like the clouds are actually moving or the rain's coming down. And so,
Well, and then just to have that, that pinky orangey, like just coming through those storm clouds is, even though it's a stormy painting, it just, to me, it feels hopeful too. It just has, a lovely sense of.
Exactly. After the rain, there's sunlight after the rain.
Yeah. Well, and you can almost kind of smell the weather too in your paintings. I think it's well, I mean, you obviously well, maybe not obviously for people, you come from an illustration background. You started out in illustration.
Yeah.
And so to actually probably tackle any subject matter, how do you keep it fresh? And I'm going to pull up the next painting here. And I would love for you to talk about, this concept of keeping it fresh. And this is Riding November Winds.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And again, those little subtle, but the one thing that drives me crazy is any kind of a formula that I see in painting. And you'd be surprised how often artists will put these generic bird shapes. And, I love the variety of the wings, the different angles of them as they're catching the breezes, just kind of showing them truly taking off and riding to try and portray that there's a wind out there. The only way you can do that is the angle of the crows, the flock of crows, and make it look like they're riding those winds. But yeah, as far as keeping it fresh, that is a difficult thing. But luckily, like referred to before, our seasons here, are wonderful. You know, that's one of the benefits of living here. I tell people this all the time. I could never live in Southern California.
Yeah.
It holds no appeal for me. And people just love, you know, it's 75 and sunny every day. I'd be bored out of my mind. You know, every day is different here, and you know, so just trying to capture those seasons. November is that time of year. Obviously, the crops are down and it's very brown and gray a lot. We're getting those first snows that snows and then it melts and it snows and it melts. But those little patches of snow are fun little touches to help show the season as well. Approaching it, the evergreen trees are still holding on to their needles, obviously, but yeah, it's just you know, finding those interesting compositions to me. They're not obvious, and it takes a little bit more time. Sometimes I have to be a little bit more thoughtful about the process and what I choose to paint. But when it hits me like a thunderbolt. You know, I'm like, I gotta paint that for whatever reason.
You know, when I first saw this painting in person and then looking at it again on the screen here, this one, again, I can feel this weather. And I can almost hear those birds. And to me, I think this is an old cornfield or around an old cornfield, because are these like silos in the back or a farm in the back?
Yep, there's a farm in the distance there. Yep.
And the birds, you'll see the birds, and they all kind of do this, and then they descend on the corn stubble and feast.
Oh yeah, I mean, huge flocks of them. Yeah, coming in, the geese and crows, and yeah, we've got a lot of bald eagles around here too lately. And you
Oh,
see them just sitting out in the field sometimes. But
yeah.
yeah, they love it when the crops are down. All the remnants of the cornfields, they just go out there and clean it all up.
Oh man, this just feels like an ode to the Midwest to me. It just, you know,
It is. That's a
peaceful,
good way to
that,
put it. Yeah.
yeah, that wind, and it's kind of it's a sharp wind, but also the stand of trees. And to me, they feel like they're reaching out as well with the birds. And it's just, yeah, you got it, man.
Thanks, Rose. Yeah, I love this painting. Actually, this is one of my favorite ones I did last year.
Yeah, it's just lovely. You know, I'm going to share the last one. And, you know, I think it's an interesting thing, to hear an artist say, yeah, I love this painting. Um, because in a way, you know, you do something and there's probably that temptation to say, I'm just going to stash this one away.
Yeah, I do that with some actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hold on to a few. You can't hold on to them all, obviously. Like your kids, you have to let them go someday. But yeah, there's some that as soon as you paint them, they're personal favorites, and I mean, we're not going to be living in Vermilion forever. Our kids are grown. We don't know where we're going to go. We'll probably stay, you know, obviously in Minnesota, but
Yeah.
I've got a couple of paintings that are just so indicative of this little town that I live in, and that I'm holding on to as memories. But yeah, they're definitely, I think all artists have their personal favorites. You're right.
Yeah. You know, and it's a funny thing. I remember having this talk with a curator about what we collect personally. And this was a few years ago. And one of the paintings that I showed was a little watercolor that Kwang Ho had done
Mm.
years and years ago of a dog that ended up being my dog. And he was just a big old grizzled shepherd husky. And it was a painting. It's not a glamorous painting. It
No.
wasn't like you would walk past it. But you know, when I have that painting in my bedroom and I look at it all the time, and he titled it Her Guardian.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
yeah, and it was actually, he was the guardian of the woman who had owned him from being a pup stray, and she passed away, and then I ended up adopting him, and
Oh,
so he became my guardian
yeah.
until he died. But you know, I think there are those paintings that we collect that, you know, if you took all of my stuff to auction, that one would be bought in. It, you know, it probably wouldn't sell, but it's one of the most precious things I own.
Yeah, for sure. In fact, just speaking of Joe Paquette again, I have a great painting of his that I kept asking. I asked him about it for years. It was one of the first times I met him when I was taking oil classes from him, and we had a workshop in Central Park. And we were down around Bethesda Fountain, and they started filming the producers that scene where Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick get in the fountain. So they're kicking everybody out. We all pack up, and Joe, being Joe, is like, "I'm not moving. I'm just
Yeah.
gonna stay here with my easel." And they must have thought he was like part of the production crew. And he did this really cool painting of the lights on the flags and stuff. And he never did anything with it. I don't know if he the same thing, if he thought it wouldn't sell or what. But I have to have that painting. It's a great memory. And it's just, yeah, everybody has. I have a Neil Sherman painting. You've had Neil in the Coors Western show previously. And yeah, Neil's, I got this little, you can barely, it's like a black painting, but there's a tiny little spot where there's a campfire, and you can just barely make out a couple people standing around it. And it's kind of one of those where it's hard to see in your house, even if the light isn't on it, properly. Or some people are like, "What is that?" It's a gold frame on a black background.
Yeah.
Look close enough, you can see little sparks coming up, and it's just such a cool painting. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff I look for. The less in my own work and other people's work, the less obvious.
Yeah. In that, okay, I want to talk about this painting, but that reminds me of the painting I have of yours, reading in the tent.
Oh yeah, I forgot you had that. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And that painting is right there.
Nice.
Just
Yeah, that's another
right
favorite memory. Yeah.
yeah. And that one, it's just kind of fun. That's another one, Andy, that I'm not going to show it because people will want to buy it, but but that's another one that's a dark painting.
Yeah.
And there's clearly somebody, and when I first saw that painting, I transported myself into that tent, because that would have been me, like,
Yep. Yeah. Everybody goes to bed early on those. We were on that rafting trip out in Idaho on the Salmon River, and exhausting days, but I'm kind of a night owl. And yeah, I was just out walking around a little bit and came back, and all the other tents were dark, but one tent was illuminated, like someone was reading it with a flashlight or something. And that was a fun one too.
Well, and you know what? I think on that painting, but I also want to talk about this idea with this painting here too, that we have, that this is waxing gibbous. That I believe, and this is why I think it's such a joy to work with artists and look at so much art all year long, is that you show me how you're looking at the world, and if I stand there and digest the way you look at the world, it helps me see more. And
A high compliment. That's what all artists want to hear. Thank you.
I think that is just, when you allow yourself, it's just so wonderful. And this is another one of those paintings that, I remember this story. Okay. A friend of mine, when her daughter was young, now her daughter's grown and has children of her own, but she was very little, and my friend had gone through a divorce. So her daughter would go to stay with her dad for a week and come back and stay with her. And her daughter called one time, and she was really upset and missing home and missing her mom. And her mom said, "Okay, go outside and look up at the sky." And they both did. And she said, "Do you see the moon?" And her daughter, through tears, said, "Yeah, I see the moon." And she said, "Okay, we're here together looking at the moon."
That's fantastic. Oh, I love that. Oh.
So this is kind of one of those paintings that does that for me. It's like, wherever you are, you're still under the sky and under the moon.
Exactly. And it's amazing when that moon is like that. Again, going back to social media, I'll see people posting, images of the moon and wherever, Czechoslovakia or something. And it's like, that's the same moon that we have, it's amazing.
Oh, we're together. Yeah.
Yeah, we're all together on this ball.
Yeah, we are. And yeah, you just would think of all people under a moon could figure it out, right?
You're right. Yeah. You'd think it wouldn't be that difficult, but it sure is. Yeah.
You would think.
Yeah, I love that painting too. That's a fun one. Again, just kind of using the rows in the field, and this is like my favorite time of year. late September to early October before they cut the fields down. And the fields are all just, the trees haven't even started turning color yet, but the bean fields are turning that dusty kind of reddish brown. And you just know that all those intense greens of summer are almost gone, and you can start getting some color and some variety in the landscape again. And yeah, it's a fun time of year to paint.
Yeah, it really is. And it's also that time of year, when, especially I think when you're a Midwesterner, maybe it's this way everywhere, when the seasons start to shift like that, you feel it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, for me, I knew that the snow was going to come and it was going to start to pile up and pile up. You know how you see, oh, that was December 21st snow, and that was December 28th snow on the road, when they push the snow up off the roads, and it just piles up. But this is like that breath where you're like, I know it's coming, and I really enjoy this one right here.
Yeah, you have these visceral almost reactions to certain times of the year, these little signals, like you said, that go off, the color of the fields or whatever. Going back, this may sound kind of cheesy, but even just on my walks, I noticed the changing of the insects. How earlier in my walks, it's, early in the summer, it's the mosquitoes every once in a while, and then it turns to flies. And then by August, you start seeing grasshoppers flying, jumping all over the place in front of you. And then by this reminder of mine, and that goes back to kid, I remember about the time that you go back to school, you start seeing caterpillars all over the place, and I start seeing caterpillars on the road in front of me. And I'm just like, that's another reminder that summer's over and fall is coming. And yeah, I love those kind of things.
Yeah. That made me think of Annie Dillard, Pilgrim on Tinker Creek. Did you ever read that?
Did not. No.
Oh,
What's the title again?
Pilgrim on Tinker Creek.
Okay.
Annie Dillard. It's really her on these walks around Tinker Creek and along it, and at her home. And just really, it's a lot of biology, but it's gorgeous writing.
Cool.
I think you would love it.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think you would love it. I read it every couple years just to.
Wow.
It's one of those.
It's
one of those.
Restores your faith in humanity again.
Yeah, in nature, just listening to her describe her awe of nature.
Yeah.
And
I love that.
Yeah, it's really wonderful. It's a good companion to your paintings. So
cool. Thanks,
Andy. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this, as always.
I appreciate it as well. Thanks for having me. It's always nice to chat with you. Yeah,
and you. Well, I certainly hope that you will make it out to Denver sometime soon, and
I hope to
hang out for a while. It'd be really good. Yeah.
Sounds good.
All right.
Have a good Christmas, okay?
Yeah, you too. Happy holidays. Stay warm. Say hello to the family, and thanks again.
You bet, Rose. Take care.
All right. You too.